Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Welcome you all to our weekly Zoom-based academic activities of oncology clubs on gynecological malignancy. Our today's sessions is tumor board, and our eminent the faculties of today are Dr. Professor A.K. Goodman. She is working in Harvard Medical School, Boston, United States, and Dr. Professor Supriya Chopra. She is professor of the Department of Radiation Oncology in Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, and Professor Dr. Bhagyalakshmi Nayak, working in Department of Gynae Oncology, Acharya Hurihar Postgraduate Institute of Cancer, Churkot, India. And I request our president of the Oncology Club, Professor Dr. M.A. Hai sir, to give the welcome address and give us permission to start the session. Sir, please.
Thank you, Professor. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. We have today tumor board in gynaecology. Hopefully, we shall start immediately. My thanks to Annie Catherine, Supriya Chopra, and Bhagyalakshmi for their precious presence here. Without any delay, I request you to start the function immediately.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for giving us opportunity to arrange these regular weekly sessions of this oncology club, and we are very much grateful to oncology club to give us this opportunity. Today, at first, we want to start with a quiz session. I request everybody to start to participate in quiz, and it is like pre-test and post-test in a workshop. I request everybody, you please answer in the questions in the screen and submit your answer. Nobody will see who are wrong and who are right. And at the end of the session, again, the same questions will be given, and again, you will answer. And among the all participants at first several weeks, we want to do lottery among all participants. But after several weeks, the right answers, among the right answers, the lottery will be done, and the one person will get the prize. So I request Mr. Samir to show the quiz, please. Samir. Poll in progress. You are requested to answer, please.
This poll will last for only 1 minute.
Yes. Okay. Dr. Rupender ঢুকেছে নাকি একটু দেখুন তো Rupender.
I'm checking, ma'am.
So is it the second question?
Yes, sir. This is the second one, sir.
Okay. Samir, we cannot see how many percent of patient participant is participating.
Sir, one of the co-hosts is stopping the poll, sir.
From next week, after the poll, make the co-host.
Hello? Hello.
Sure, sir.
Hello.
So Shahana, how many questions? 2 or 3?
We have 5 questions.
Total 5 questions, sir.
MashaAllah, MashaAllah. ठीक है. Okay.
Can we go for only 3 questions in next days? Kamal bhai?
Okay, it's okay. But how many percentage participation? আমি দেখতে পাচ্ছি না. Percentage of participation কত?
Oh, I can see.
50%, sir. 50%.
Okay. So we need more participation.
Oh, yes, yes.
This is the third question.
Kamal bhai, I am trying to make the questions by our gynae oncology students.
This is dangerous. Then the question will go out.
Ah,
Oh, sir. Now this time the question is, I have did those. So if you tell this, then I will not.
No. This question is based on today's case.
Yes.
So we want to see the message, whether everybody is correct or not. That is the shift of message we want to see.
Yes. Yes.
It's okay. There is, prize is from lottery, not from the best performer. So no problem.
Okay, yes.
This is the fourth question.
And only 1 minute time. I think 1 minute is too much. We can make it
Yes, yes. Yeah.
next time, maybe 40 seconds or 30 seconds. Because only one answer, everybody will pick one answer. Maybe next week, Samir, make it 30 seconds.
Definitely, sir.
Samir, if possible, post session, make it 30 seconds.
Yes, okay, okay. Thank
Definitely,
you.
sir.
This is the last question.
This is the fourth question, sir. There is
Okay.
another question after this. Last poll question.
Samir, co-host cannot see the participation.
Yes, they can, sir.
I cannot see. I only see the question.
for the participant. You
But I
can-
am seeing the participant, 55%.
it is only
Sir, I
the,
cannot see. I don't know why.
60% participant here.
59% voted till now.
Sir, we have highest 62% of participation.
No problem. So we go to the case, Shahana.
That's right.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you very much. Now is our case discussion. Today's our presenter. We have 3 cases. 2 cases are cancer cervix and 1 is choriocarcinoma. Our first presenter is Dr. Sharif Nazmur Nahar. She is resident in Gynae Oncology, National Institute of Cancer Research and Hospital. I request Sharif Nazmur Nahar to present your case.
Am I audible, madam?
Yes, you are. Who will share his screen, you or Samir?
Ma'am's presentation slide is okay, madam. She can share.
Okay, okay.
Can you please the slides?
Yes.
Honorable Chairperson, respected faculties, senior and junior colleagues, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to all to today's UMA board presentation. I am Dr. Sharif Nazmun Nahar, student of Gynecological Oncology Subspecialty of National Institute of Cancer Research Hospital. Can I start, madam?
Yes, yes. Continue. A 70 years old multiparous diabetic hypertensive lady diagnosed as a case of carcinoma cervix stage 3B. Histopathology report was squamous cell carcinoma grade 2 in 1998. She was treated with external beam radiotherapy 25 fraction followed by intracavitary radiotherapy 3 fraction HDR completed within due time. She was in regular follow-up for 2 years and then lost to follow-up. After 21 years, on 2019, she developed parvaginal bleeding. She consulted with a gynecologist and advised for PAPS test and colposcopy. Her cervical cytology report is negative for intraepithelial lesion or malignancy. On colposcopy, there was a small ulcerated area away from the os, otherwise normal findings. Biopsy was taken from that site. Her colposcopic guided tissue biopsy report shows chronic cervicitis with squamous metaplasia, no malignancy seen. She was diagnosed as a case of senile vaginitis and treated conservatively. Her symptoms was improved. 1 year later, she again developed vaginal bleeding. This time, she consulted with radiation oncologist and advised for ultrasonography of whole abdomen, transvaginal ultrasonogram, and chest X-ray PA view. Her ultrasonogram whole abdomen revealed uterus normal in size, moderate collection within the uterine cavity, and internal solid echogenic structure. Cervix was irregular and heterogeneous. Transvaginal ultrasonography also revealed dense uterine collection within internal solid echogenic substance and irregular heterogeneous cervix. Chest X-ray revealed cardiomegaly, otherwise normal study. The patient then referred to gynecological oncologist. Patient was moderately anemic, non-icteric, accessible lymph nodes were not palpable. Our abdominal examination was normal. On pelvic examination, the whole cervix was replaced by growth. Uterus was 10 weeks size. Nodular growth involved all the vaginal wall extending up to the lateral pelvic wall. Biopsy was taken from anterior and posterior vaginal wall, and she was advised for MRI of whole abdomen. Her histopathology report shows moderately differentiated papillary adenocarcinoma. Here is her MRI film showing uterus with fluid collection and urinary bladder without contrast and with contrast, coronal view. And this is the sagittal view, uterus enlarged in size with endometrial collection, cervix, and urinary bladder. Her MRI report shows enlarged uterus with huge endometrial collection with thinning of myometrium, cervix enlarged in size, irregular in outline, inhomogeneous parenchyma with invasion mass lesion, which is about 6 into 5 centimeter. After IV contrast, diffuse inhomogeneous enhancements of the mass is noted with loss of transition zone. The mass causing narrowing of endocervical canal with involvement of the lower third of the vagina and also extending to the lower uterine segment, parametrial invasion, right rectal and right lower ureteric invasion. There was no
evidence of abdominopelvic lymphadenopathy. Final impression of MRI suggestive of carcinoma cervix with vaginal, uterine, rectal, right ureteric invasion, stage 3C. The tumor board plan was review of the slide and metastatic workup by PET-CT, but the patient could not afford PET-CT. The review of the slide shows clear cell carcinoma composed of anaplastic cells, some having clear cytoplasm and Hobnil pattern. Then the decision was palliative chemotherapy and review for radiation therapy. Accordingly, she received 3-cycle chemotherapy with paclitaxel, carboplatin, and bevacizumab protocol. And first question, is it second malignancy?
Question.
I'm so sorry. Can we just have a summary of the whole case?
Yes. Yes. Nazmunar, please summarize the case. in
Just
short.
summarize.
Summarize the case in short. Nazmunar, please.
Yes, madam.
Just in short. Don't go for the slides. Just in short, summarize it.
Old lady was diagnosed as a case of CS carcinoma cervix stage 3B and squamous cell carcinoma, and she treated with EBRT and ICRT and completed her therapy. And then she lost for follow-up. After 21 years, she developed paravaginal bleeding and some investigation done, on which pap smear and colposcopy reveal normal, and ultrasonogram shows uterine cavity with fluid-filled uterine cavity and echogenic structure within the cavity. And her MRI shows carcinoma cervix, suggestive of carcinoma cervix with vaginal, uterine, rectal, right ureteric invasion, stage 3C. Then her vaginal wall was full of growth, and from which biopsy was taken. And histopathology report revealed moderately differentiated adenocarcinoma, papillary adenocarcinoma. By tumor board, slide was reviewed and it revealed papillary carcinoma.
Thank you so much.
Clear cell carcinoma. Sorry.
So, is there any role of knowing about the endometrial histopathology? Yeah. Yes, the first question is second malignancy. I think with such a long gap, we have to accept that it is a second malignancy. Dr. Supriya, can you comment on this? Dr. Supriya?
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. So, what is the status of ovaries on the MRI report?
Ovaries was normal in size and completely separate from the mass.
Yeah, looking at the histology and the overall picture, I would actually, think of it being a second primary, which is arising either in the endometrium or vagina, which has infiltrated other structures. It's more likely, in my opinion, to be an endometrial second primary rather than anything else.
Yes, that's why I think. But because looking at the growth in the cervix, I think it was thought that it was CA cervix because it was infiltrating into the parametrium and also the ureters. But I think CA endometrium is also clear cell, and some sarcomas are also quite common after this radiation. So, but anyway, the management is not going to change. Even if it is a CA endometrium, which is extended into the cervix and parametrium and into the ureteric tissue. So I think the management would not change. But it's only good to know whether if it's primarily from the cervix or the endometrium or the vagina.
So Priya, after 20 years, what is your idea about the recurrence? on a treated patient?
Recurrence is unlikely. We do see,
Mhm.
every year, at least in our clinical practice, 8 to 10 patients who, after a very long interval, will come up with second malignancies. This one is easy because histology is clearly different, but sometimes you have same histology and then it's a challenge. But I think that is semantics in the sense that trying to find out where the origin is. And in this case, I would put my money on it being an endometrial cancer. And looking at the disease extent of this patient, there could have been various treatment options. One is to, give chemotherapy, but then about the choice of agent, like for example here, paclicarbobevacizumab. So if you consider it recurrence, then this is a regimen which is justified. But if you think it's a second primary, then one can debate about the combination that is used. Like for example, if it is endometrium, you may want to either go with upfront chemoradiation or give chemo and then assess, because looking at the extent, this is clearly not operable. So
Yes.
the management would be either, so I personally favor more going with CTRT kind of approach, using both modalities together, but giving anterior chemo is also okay. And then patient has to be assessed for local treatment. And I think Dr. Goodman and Dr. Bhagyalakshmi can comment. At least to me, it doesn't look operable by any means.
So my question to Supriya again is, you are putting your money for endometrium considering the location and the age of the patient or anything else?
Histology per se.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, yes,
Histology.
yeah.
Okay.
Just everybody, just a minute. Everybody has requested to put your questions in chat box. Please put your questions in chat box. Yeah. I have a question that after 20 years, and how many years can we again re-irradiate the patients?
Irradiate beginning 18 months, and there is no upper limit. So sometimes as early as, so 18 months is ideal, but sometimes we have gone in again as early as 12 to 14 months also, but that is more in recurrent setting. And so I think it re-irradiation, if done properly, is quite safe, provided you can. And 18 months actually comes in between because you would like to, give time for good biology. In this case, this is a second primary. And if you look into recovery kinetics of tissues, the maximum recovery of tissues occurs within first 12 months. So after that, it is relatively safe to go again. And so if we if we plan to re-irradiate her, we will go full dose with CTRT and brachytherapy. Obviously, one cannot be very exact about the recovery of tissues, but we have our own series of re-irradiation now with almost 64 to 65 patients with a median follow-up of around 4 years. So toxicity in these patients, 1 in 3 patients or 1 in 4 patients are going to have serious toxicity following retreatments. But that is the only chance of cure, because if you can't do surgery, if you do nothing for them, anyway they are going to die sooner or later. So it is a value judgment that a patient has to make. And if surgery, in her case it doesn't look operable, but if surgery is performed, she will have at least a dual bag, one two stomas day one. And when I talk to patients, I convince them that there's 1 in 4 chance that you will end up with serious morbidity and a stoma. And I've hardly had patients saying no for retreatment. So we would like to go ahead with full course of re-irradiation and brachy.
Yes. And if it is just another question, if it is in recurrent carcinoma cervix after 12 months or after 2 years, we see that there is recurrence malignancy. In that cases, we also can re-irradiate the patient.
So it depends where the recurrence is. So if it is a central
Central
recurrence,
recurrence?
we
Yes.
will prefer surgery if it is amenable to surgery. So for example, the surgeon
Yes.
says because of certain reasons, surgery
Yes.
cannot be performed.
Yes.
And in that case, it doesn't, it is not good biology, somebody recurring within 12 months. Then
Yes.
in that case, you discuss with the patients. And in such patients, I would first give systemic chemotherapy And it's more a test of biology. Somebody who responds and remains controlled, you could still go in and operate that patient if the surgeon is on board. And when I say surgery, it could be anything. And I think both the surgeons on the group can agree. It could be hysterectomy, it could be exenteration, depending on the disease extent. But if surgery is not envisaged, I will definitely go ahead and re-irradiate her if there is no metastasis. And if the recurrence is in the nodal region, in that case we would do FNAC. And I remember with Dr. Goodman we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago where she spoke about RFA also being considered for nodal recurrences. But if intervention radiology is not available, we would go ahead and re-irradiate. So for us, our clinical practice, I appreciate, is slightly more aggressive within our center, where we have not only re-irradiated but gone in third and fourth time also for treating nodal relapses. But yes, we in our clinical practice we are quite confident by going full dose second time and sometimes third times also.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a hope for our these types of patients, then they can hear it.
Shahana, there are questions in the chat box.
Yes, yes. There is questions in the chat box. This is from the, is there any, if the treatment is the same, should we go for immunohistochemistry?
I think because the biopsy is very clear. So in case it's available, I think there's no harm if you do it. But because that was the initial was squamous cell carcinoma and this is adenocarcinoma. And 2 times I think it has been proved that it's adenocarcinoma. Maybe 1 time it's micropapillary, the other it is clear cell. But this is adenocarcinoma. So it's not nothing to do with the primary.
Yes.
And one question to Dr. Supriya, actually, I wanted to ask you that with this normal cobalt machine, how early can you go for re-irradiation? Because every center doesn't have a LINAC.
I think when you are considering re-radiation, it has I would not venture, retreating within 12 months with a cobalt again. So when you are planning re-radiation, if patient is suitable for interstitial brachy or intracavitary brachy, we do brachytherapy. If it is not suitable, then we use external. And there are limitations to what you can do with cobalt. I would consider referring this patient to a center which has facilities, because it's
Okay.
very important to save normal structures. You can't save normal structures if you retreat with cobalt, and then you'll end up in higher morbidity for the patient.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So I think for the juniors, what Supriya is trying to say that we can safely treat the patient second time, because we can see that we are taking the help of brachy, which is coming from inside to outside. And
Yes.
when we are using LINAC by IMRT, so we can strictly restrict the dose to the OAR. So here, tumor is not our headache. Headache is our OAR when we have 18 months interval, even 12 months, because OAR was not getting enough dose if we are treating from the beginning in a very nice way. So even we are re-challenging with a 80 grade dose, because the majority contribution will come from the brachy. So here we will be safe. That is what Supriya is trying to say, and it is a treatable disease. So what she said at the last line, that we should refer the patient to a LINAC center, because our challenge will be the OAR, not the tumor.
If it is the central recurrence, then surgery is the treatment, must be the treatment of choice. That if we can do the complete surgery. If it is not possible, then we will go for either re-irradiation or chemoradiation, and what Kamal Bhai has told. Yes, Kamal Bhai, the another question in chat box, it is not related to this cases. Can we ask this?
No, we focus on this. There is a question from Professor M.A. Heiser. Supriya, can it be the cause of the first radiation, because it is not a sarcomatoid lesion? Do you think there is any contribution of the radiation?
We can never know for sure. So classically it is sarcomas, but it can be anything.
So preferably, if it is a sarcoma, we can more easily relate it. But if it is non-sarcomatous, then we can doubt, but we cannot be sure about it.
So for the brachy part, I just wanted to know how you want to treat with brachytherapy. You have to treat whole vagina, uterine cavity, and parametrium.
How to do the tools, yeah.
So Priya,
So she's showing, yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Can I comment?
Yes, okay.
Is someone else trying to say something?
No, please go ahead.
No.
Okay. I actually just sent an email to our radiation colleague here at Mass General about the issue of re-radiation. I'm very interested to hear your comments about the ability to re-radiate. So I'm curious. I was having trouble finding some articles on it. So I'm interested. The thing that I would worry about, especially someone who's in their 70s, who's lived a life and has had, I assume, radical radiation therapy for stage 3B 23 years earlier. So she had a curative radiation, so very good radiation, is that she probably runs the risk of this area being devascularized, not having a very good blood supply because of sort of obliteration of the end arterioles from radiation. And so one of the worries maybe with re-radiation is causing pelvic vault necrosis. Again, I'm not a radiation oncologist, so I defer to radiation oncologists on this issue. If I find some articles on it about the incidence and the outcomes, I will send them along. If you have articles, I'd love to have you share them with us. My other comments, I agree with what other people are saying. This is probably a second primary. How do you define a central pelvic recurrence versus a second primary? As was mentioned, the issue is histology. It's a different histology. It turns out that in old reviews of secondary malignancies after radiation, the majority are actually adenocarcinomas, not sarcomas. So while we always think of sarcoma as being secondary to radiation, when we look at the literature on secondary primaries in the pelvis in women who have an intact uterus, it's usually an adenocarcinoma that's more likely. Should this patient truly have a clear cell cancer, unfortunately, those are not very chemosensitive. I actually agree with the recommendations, and she received 3 cycles of carbotaxol and bevacizumab. But unfortunately, clear cells are famous for not being super sensitive. And that leads to the question, does she truly have unresectable disease? Or is she someone who has local disease with no evidence of distant recurrence or distant spread? And is she a candidate for a pelvic exoneration? So that would require imaging studies to understand, does she have a chest x-ray, any imaging to show, even if it's not a PET scan, that she has no sign of distant spread?
Shahana, was there any metastatic workup from lung? Was it clear?
Yes,
was
lung,
clear.
everything was clear. Yes. Only whole vagina, there was a nodular metastatic nodule in the whole vagina, and also the MRI shows the involvement of the rectum and the whole vagina, lateral pelvic all everywhere.
So patient was advised for PET CT, she couldn't do it, but the metastatic workup was done.
Yes.
And they were confirmed that there was no distant metastasis, localized disease to the pelvis.
So now what will be her trend after completion of the completed 3-cycle chemotherapy, piclicarbo with bevacizumab? Then what will be her next treatment? Re-addition. This final, is it? Either
AK, I have a
brachytherapy or
question.
even
AK, I have a question. What was the is it justified to use bevacizumab at the first line to this patient? Will you give it in this patient?
Yes, why not? I mean, you have a terrible prognosis with clear cells, and like I said, the chemos doesn't have as great a response as to other adenocarcinomas. So I don't have any objection to it. I don't know that we have information about if in this particular type of tumor. I mean, the studies in gynecologic oncology for bevacizumab are really in ovarian cancer. So you're sort of making a leap from the ovarian cancer literature to what we think is a primary uterine cancer here. Yeah, so I don't have any particular objection to it. And then in terms of what would be next, again, I probably would wonder about a pelvic exenteration in her, if unless she's had a miraculous response to chemo, in which case you might, I guess you could consider a hysterectomy. But usually, again, if she's had radical radiation therapy, as it sounds like she had for her 3B, it's going to be pretty hard to separate the bladder and the rectum from that uterus, and you run the very, very high risk of fistulas.
So Priya, any comment now?
I would say that there are a couple of considerations apart from what has already been said for her. One is that bevacizumab, in this particular case, so there are not in recurrent setting like this, but we have some data. I know here the discussion is also about not only about giving bevacizumab, but the concern if you want to re-irradiate with bevacizumab. So I will just answer this stepwise. So one is that we have two different histologies, adeno-CA and clear cell. If it is adeno-CA, it's a relapse, probably second primary. So one could have started with paclicarbo and then added another agent. But there are a couple of other agents which are approved for endometrial cancer now, which could be considered. And second thing is that the second part of the path is clear cell. Now we know if it's a clear cell histology, then it is not very sensitive to chemotherapy. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, there was a large SEER database analysis which shows that if you have a clear cell, and that is more in setting of ovarian rather than endometrial, that radiation works better than systemic chemotherapy. So that would have been the rationale to use CTRT. So now that bevacizumab is already used, I would still actually want to go ahead and give this patient re-RT, but I will be more cautious. But there is, I think, one phase 2 study, and again NRG study, where CTRT is combined with bevacizumab, and there were no excessive fistula observed, at least in primary setting. So I think this patient has very limited therapeutic options, and if we don't do anything for her, anyway, she's going to be miserable with relapse and recurrence. So I would like to take this patient into confidence and go ahead with CTRT and brachytherapy, knowing that there is a risk of fistula and perforation, which is very much there for this patient.
And would you like to stent the ureter before going for chemoradiation? Dr. Supriya, what is your protocol? Because as we know,
It all depends, what is her renal function. So many times, 20 years later, when patients are coming with HUN, there is a chance that the ipsilateral kidney already doesn't have function. So I'd like to first do a DTPS scan, see the functionality of the kidney. If it still function, then probably yes, because whatever we do, she's going to land up with massive fibrosis. So if the kidney is still functional, there is a chance to prophylactically stent it, but practice can differ. There is no hard and fast rule. Another clinician may decide not to stent and stent her when it is needed. So both ways is okay. If her GFR is fine, if creat clearance is fine, one can wait and watch before decision of stenting is taken. If ipsilateral kidney is already dysfunctional by GFR assays, I wouldn't go ahead and stent.
thank you. But had it been a primary CA cervix 3B, what is your practice?
We don't
Suppose
stent,
there's yeah,
we don't stent prophylactically.
not at all.
No.
Though there
Okay,
is
Supriya.
hydronephrosis.
There was a question, Supriya, from our colleague, senior colleague, Dr. Banu, that she wants to have an idea that if you are really treating this patient with a history of ICRT and ABRT 20 years back, well, it is a re-radiation per se, and the vagina is totally a target. So what will be your mode of brachytherapy you will be using here? How are you going to cover it? Can you just give an idea? Cylinder with ICRT? Supriya?
Hello. I was just
Yes.
trying to find some pictures, and if you people agree, in one of the future sessions, I can talk about, I can take a lecture complete on re-radiation. But
Good.
for these patients, so I will start with external radiation because right now her disease is quite extensive, and just looking at the clinical description, she is not eligible for any upfront brachytherapy. So typically, we would use a very conformal technique like IMRT and try to give 36 to 40 gray along with concurrent platinum. And at 36 to 40 gray, we will reassess the disease with MRI and otherwise, and then give patient a break for at least 1 to 2 weeks to allow some tumor regression. Now, this particular patient has disease in uterus, she has in vagina, she has in parametrium. So she clearly needs an advanced brachytherapy. So many times what we do is that they have to be treated much like uterine patients. And if I were to treat radically endometrial cancer, a different kind of applicator is required for top heavy loading for endometrial canal if patient is not getting operated. But many times, like in our countries where endometrial cancer is not very common and we don't treat as many radically, I tend to use two central tandems for brachytherapy, put it in the endometrial canal, load endometrial canal, and along with that, you can either use a cylinder if disease is not very thick. If disease is very thick, then along with cylinder, so for example, she could also be a candidate for Sayed Neblet interstitial brachy along with central tandem, or a Mupit with central tandem. So you end up implanting uterus, vagina, parametrium for this patient. So the implant will have to be individualized. And now, in some centers, I know there is also access to Venezia applicator. So that is a universal applicator when you have this kind of disease extent. So there is a possibility to implant.
So I think, Shahana, we can focus a day where when we can listen to Supriya
Yes.
about the radiation and also these tricky tips of treating these extensive diseases. And my intention of bringing the bevacizumab issue, Supriya and Goodman, is that first line bevacizumab, because we are not treating it as a recurrence, we are treating it as a fresh case. First line bevacizumab, even in ovary, is not a great thing. And here, if it was me, I would have not used bevacizumab because it is not giving me any. There is no strong data even for clear cell to give some additional response with bevacizumab at the beginning. So probably I would have started with paclitaxel. So that was my point of difference there. But yes, as you mentioned, so everybody have their own logic to justify. But probably I would not bet my money on bevacizumab. I mean, I would have kept the money on bevacizumab for future treatment because this lady will need far more management in future. So Shahana,
So Kamal,
Yes.
Kamal sir,
Yeah.
yes, please.
Yeah.
Kamal sir, yeah.
Yes,
So,
sir.
I'm just being respectful. So no, I just looked it up and I just sent you all, or you can send it if I have the wrong group list for this, 2 papers on secondary primaries after radiation that are actually pretty good. And it again confirms what I was saying about it being mostly adenocarcinomas. And interestingly, in one of the papers, 42% of secondary primaries were clear cell. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. So interesting for your information. And the second thing I looked up was bevacizumab in clear cell cancers. And actually, I've seen this at MGH2, where because clear cell cancers are famous for not being responsive to our primary GYN chemotherapy, is that some people talk about using renal cell chemotherapy regimens, that perhaps we should treat clear cells as a different entity, less about the point of origin, but more about the cell type. So if you look at the renal cell cancer literature, bevacizumab is one of the drugs that's used, and more recently, immunotherapy is used. So to the point that conventional chemotherapy like carboplatin Taxol is not very likely to be a good response to a clear cell histology. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Onike. Now I think we shall go to the second case, and I request Professor Dr. Supriya to please stay with us, because we have our gynecologist colleague and we have another case that is a choriocarcinoma. In between, we want to discuss that case, and next, our third case is carcinoma cervix. It is another the complicated case. The patient presented with hematuria after 20 years and parvaginal bleeding. So please stay with us. Now we will discuss the choriocarcinoma case. And our presenter is Dr. Rifat Ara. Samir, please share the screen of the choriocarcinoma case.
Sure, madam.
Yes.
Are the slides visible, madam?
Yes.
Should I start?
Yes.
Okay. Respected faculties from home and abroad, my beloved students of gynecology and oncology, and all the participants, Assalamu alaikum. I am working as assistant professor at gynecology department of NICRH, going to present a case. Mrs. X, a regularly menstruating lady of 45 years, para 6 vaginal delivery, class 2 MR from Bhola, went to Bhola Sodar Hospital with the complaints of lower abdominal pain and irregular vaginal bleeding for 3 months, constipation for 1 month, and mass in the vagina for 1 month. Next. She gives history of MR 3 months back due to short period of amenorrhea, in spite of taking regularly oral contraceptive pill. On examination, she was severely anemic. Parabdominal examination was normal. On pelvic examination, it was extremely tender, revealed a cystic mass in the vagina, which was separate from cervix. Rectal examination revealed pelvic mass, which was continuous with the uterus. Next. Ultrasonography of lower abdomen was done, which revealed a complex pelvic mass of 6.5 into 5.9 centimeter, and report was written as suggestive of adnexal or cervical mass. Next. This is the picture of ultrasonography of lower abdomen revealing the mass, and its origin could not be delineated precisely whether it is adnexal or whether it is of uterine. Next. At Bhola Sodar Hospital, the patient was admitted and biopsy taken from the vaginal cystic mass. Then she was referred to gynecologist at Dhaka. Pelvic examination was done. It revealed posterior vaginal wall inflamed, tender, and features of recent biopsy. Next. So my first question is, what is the provisional diagnosis from history and clinical examination? This question is particularly for the students, because when they're appearing in the exam, they are not provided the histopathology report. So what would be the provisional diagnosis in this case?
What is your diagnosis?
This is a pelvic mass with vaginal metastasis.
Yes, that may be. But if we take the proper history, that after MR, she has this type of this type of symptom and this type of and with this complaint, she attended to her gynecologist or gynecologist. Next. Sami, next.
Investigations. Biopsy from vaginal cystic mass revealed choriocarcinoma. Hemoglobin was 6 gram per dl. Beta HCG level was more than 10 lakh milli-international units per ml. Serum TSH level was less than 0.01 micro-international unit per ml. Other hematologic and biochemical reports were normal. ECG showed sinus tachycardia. Next. The question is, what is the correlation between the serum TSH level with diagnosis of the patient, whether a free T4 or T3 level should be done in this patient, and what is the probability of thyroid storm, and what should be done to prevent this?
Dr. Bhagyalakshmi, please. Bhagyalakshmi, please. Are you here? Okay.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes.
The question is already shown. What is the correlation of serum TSH level with the diagnosis of the patient, and whether we should do free T4, T3 level in this case? I'm requesting Dr. Samir to show the previous slide where TSH level is written. It is less than 0.01 micro-international unit per ml. Next.
Yeah, so I mean, I think of two things. One, it's possible that this is a false TSH level that correlates with, you know, a gonadotropin levels from the pituitary, and so you might have a falsely elevated TSHs. I think it's totally fine to subset it out and check the T4, T3. The other possibility is there something going on with theca lutein cysts in her ovaries and stuff like that. So you can occasionally have the situation where you, when you're going to intervene on someone, get a problem with thyroid storm. So I think that it is important to evaluate this further, and sometimes even include an endocrinologist to help you with that. I'm interested in other people's thoughts too. You guys have a lot of experience with this.
Thank you, madam. Next. Other important investigations are X-ray chest PA view, which showed bilateral pulmonary nodules suggestive of metastasis. CT scan of chest was done. Bilateral extensive lung metastasis. Whether there is echo, Dr. Samir, please look into the matter. Can I repeat? Please, previous slide. Previous slide. Okay, I am continuing with this slide. This is no. Yes. CT scan of chest showed bilateral extensive lung metastasis, and in CT chest, the largest lesion size was 4.5 into 4 centimeter in right lobe and 3 into 3 centimeter in left lobe. Next. Next slide, please. These are the pictures of CT scan of chest in axial plane, showing multiple nodules with variable size in both lung. Next. This picture shows the largest lesions in the right and left lobe. Next. So the question is, when do we advise CT scan in spite of positive findings in X-ray in case of choriocarcinoma? And is it necessary to do CT test in this case?
Bhagyalakshmi, please. Dr. Bhagyalakshmi. Bhagyalakshmi, are you here? Okay. She's probably muted. Right?
I mean, I always feel like more information is power, but you do have a patient who has advanced metastatic choriocarcinoma, correct? And I think you have a lot of information. So really, sort of, I would think about what are you going to do in terms of treatment for her? Again, I think you have lots more information with the CT scan, and I think you also need to evaluate her brain, right, in this situation. So I feel like we've got information about liver mets, potentially stuff in the chest. Kamal is saying then we should be very cautious during radiation. Oh, you're talking about something else. Sorry. Sorry. But anyway, so if I wanted to do anything more on this patient, it would be to image her brain and be sure you're not dealing with any brain metastasis, right? Just someone with widespread metastatic disease. Adding a CT of the chest, sure, if you can afford it, but you also have enough information to probably go ahead with combination chemotherapy, right? Is that what you were going to go with for this?
So, AK, will you go for MRI of brain or for any extensive choriocarcinoma, or you will be looking for some component where you will go for MRI?
Correct. I mean, I think if I did a DNC and I got choreo and everything else being equal, I don't know that I would think about scanning her brain. But in someone who's got liver metastasis, that's hematogenous spread, I do think you probably want to check because you're going to do something different, right? It's all about, you have to ask yourself when you're getting a test, how does it change what I'm going to do? If it doesn't change what you're going to do and you have enough information to get going on the therapy, the extra information is gravy. Sure, it adds, finesse to measuring your tumors. But if you have enough information, fine. If it's going to change your management, for instance, if she has brain metastases, while you might give her Emico, you might also do brain radiation, right? I mean, you're sort of thinking about how much crosses the blood-brain barrier. What's her risk with brain metastasis? Could she have a seizure? Do you need to put her on steroids, right? I mean, it sends you down a different level of inquiry and intervention. So that would be how I'd base this. I'm curious what's other people's experience with this.
But okay, regarding these questions, if we get the chest X-ray, the multiple metastatic nodule, even after that, we'll go for CT chest. Am I correct? Even after that, if patient can afford, and what extra information it will give to us.
Exactly. I agree with you. I mean, I think you have enough to go on, so why use her money that way, right? You have enough information, she's got metastatic disease. That's fine. What else can you learn from a CT scan that you don't get from a chest X-ray? Well, you might be able to see if she's had any pulmonary emboli, if that's important, if she's having respiratory distress, and you need to evaluate her. Does she need to be on anticoagulation? So does it give you information that will change your management? That gets back to my core question clinically about doing tests, right? Because we've got so many tests we can do. So the question is, does it change your management? If you have a high suspicion that she has a pulmonary embolus, you're not going to get that information from a chest X-ray. You will get that from a chest CT scan. On the other hand, if she otherwise clinically, you're not worrying about that, she's got chest metastasis, you're done. You have that information. It doesn't change what you're going to do for her. Yeah.
Now, can I add one thing, Dr. Sharna?
Yes. I was calling you repeatedly. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just read some more. So the only thing where we actually go for CT scan is that when we have really very high levels of HCG and the X-ray chest doesn't show anything. So in those cases, we really do a CT scan just to confirm that we are not missing out lesions in the lungs. If it's a really high risk disease and the beta HCG is very high, but the chest X-ray shows nothing. So in those cases, we do CT scan, though we know it's not going to change the scoring or anything, but still for us to know so that we'll predict any brain mets or something. So in those cases, we do the CT scan.
Otherwise, if it is the lung metastasis in chest X-ray, we see the multiple metastasis, you don't go for the CT chest. Yeah?
CT chest, we don't go. No.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Then CT scan of whole abdomen was done, which revealed large soft tissue density mass in the endometrial cavity with internal necrosis, mass invading the myometrium, extending up to the serosa level. And after IV contrast, heterogeneous enhancement was seen, and both adnexa were normal. Next slide, please. Next slide. These are the pictures of CT scan of abdomen, and this is the sagittal view, where it is seen that the uterus is filled up with a large mass with heterogeneous enhancement. Next slide, please. These are the pictures of axial view, and next slide, please. Next slide. Here it is shown that, yes, already it is given. It is shown that the lesion has invaded the myometrium and extended up to the serosa, and the uterine cavity is somewhat irregular. Next slide, please. So questions are whether MRI of pelvis needed in this case. And the second question is already answered by Professor A.K. Goodman, that MRI of brain is needed in this case. And my next question is, what will be the treatment in this case?
Whether you're going to ultimately need to do a hysterectomy on this patient, or whether this patient can have fertility sparing. Again, I don't know that it really adds any additional information about making decisions about treatment, because you have advanced metastatic disease, and probably in my practice in Boston would not order an MRI for this patient. I would say aside of a brain MRI, yes, I definitely would do that. And beyond that, I would get started. The issue of getting endocrine involved to understand her thyroid issue, I think, is important too, to see if she needs to be on thyroid suppressive medicine. Okay. In terms of treatment, I think she needs the full-blown EMICO. She's high risk, and I would probably go with a full EMICO treatment. And if she does have brain metastases, I would consult radiation oncology to think about brain radiation. Yeah.
Bhagaloki, please.
Yes. I don't think, yes, I agree very much with Dr. K, that we don't really do a MRI. A good ultrasound is good enough for us, because our patients are not very well off to do all these investigations. So a good ultrasound of the abdomen, and in case it's necessary, we can go for a CT. But in this case, at least we are not doing MRI. Because anyway, it's not going to change my treatment. Yeah.
When you go for the CT chest or MRI whole abdomen or MRI abdomen in case of the choriocarcinoma, when you do this?
Yes, I'll tell you that if usually most of the patients will already have a ultrasound report when they come. So if there is some doubt about the extent of the disease or something, in those cases we must do, so that we'll confirm whether there's liver met, spleen met, or what are the other sites which are involved with the disease, or that's when we usually do. Otherwise, with the beta HCG and a simple ultrasound, we go ahead with the treatment.
How can we score her without the proper, either the imaging, the good type of imaging?
Yeah, but we don't do a CT scan always. If the ultrasound has shown that it's only disease in the endometrial cavity and there are thecal uterine cysts, and the X-ray chest is normal and the beta HCG is moderately raised, so we go ahead with treatment only. So, but if the beta HCG is very high and we think it's a very high risk disease, so in those cases we may think about doing a CT scan to rule out other metastasis, sites of metastasis. But if it is a good ultrasound, we are happy with it.
Dr. Rupender is with us. I request Dr. Samir, Mr. Samir, to unmute Professor Dr. Rupender, please. Samir.
Sure, madam, doing.
Make her co-host.
Done, madam.
Yes.
So Rupinder, your comment, please.
Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be with
Yes,
all
good
of you.
evening.
So just to add to whatever Bhagyalakshmi was saying in terms of MRI, it's very right. Actually, ultrasound of the pelvis is enough. And we might need an MRI sometimes to diagnose an invasive mole. But otherwise, ultrasound of the pelvis is quite enough.
But sometimes ultrasound cannot give us the enough information whether it is the invasive mole or whether it is the scoring system, whether there is metastatic disease in ultrasound whole abdomen, and there is the beta
Yeah,
HCG. Yeah, in
yes,
that
yes.
case?
No, sometimes if the beta HCG is plateauing or it's rising after having had a fall, then we would want to know whether it is an invasive mole or if there is anything else present that we are missing out in the uterine cavity, endometrial cavity, then that is the time when it is absolutely essential to have an MRI. But just to initiate the treatment, we can monitor by doing merely beta HCG levels. We don't, and an ultrasound of the pelvis. We don't really need to have a MRI of the pelvis. That's what I meant.
Shahana, the message is even neither Bhagyalakshmi nor Rupinder working in two scenario. It is a government scenario and it is a corporate scenario. Nobody is going for a MRI in this case. A good ultrasonogram is fair enough to even give us the organ metastasis like liver involvement and X-ray chest if it is obvious. They are going for CT scan or MRI if there is a doubt or if there is a need. So these high-end investigations are secondary. Primarily, they are happy with the ultrasound, good ultra. They are telling it is a good ultrasonogram. If it is not a good image, even MRI will not work because MRI is a film. We need to have a good quality MRI and also good interpretation. So the message they are trying to give us is that good ultrasonogram and basic investigation is good enough to start this case treatment.
Yes, and we can do this in recurrent cases. Am I correct?
Yeah, Shahana, if I might just add as an offside, places and people where things like MRI and CT scan and all these things are not available, we find that our ultrasonologists are sometimes very good and they give us excellent interpretation and excellent results. So we should not disregard ultrasound as a lesser investigation.
And especially if you add up Doppler with it, I think it will give you a lot of information about the invading lesions in the myometrium and all those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with Bhagya.
Yes, but in resistant but recurrent cases where the chemo is not working, or even after the single agent chemotherapy, in that cases, sometimes we may need to do this type of investigation. Am I correct?
In case we don't find anything in the uterine cavity by ultrasound, or we don't find any lesion in the abdominal cavity or pelvis, and the beta HCG is plateauing. So in those cases, we can go for some advanced imaging to find out whether we are missing out some resistant focus somewhere.
There is a question in the chat box. There is in a post-molar follow-up, a young lady showed gradual rise of beta HCG. So ultrasonography showed suggested and myometric invasion found in ultrasound X-ray is normal. What investigation you will suggest next?
No, with that only, this finding only, we can go ahead. This is a recurrent case.
Yes.
Or what is it? She has already had chemotherapy.
Yes.
Okay. So recurrence means when she has recurred. But if she has taken first line, we'll score her again and start chemotherapy. And still, if the chemotherapy does not work, if it is invasive mole, I think we can counsel her for a segmental resection of that portion only. So but again, that is the last resort. We don't do that quite very commonly because we would find some kind of chemotherapy which will work for her.
Can I just add one point, please, Bhagya?
Yeah, please.
See, it's like this, that whenever we find that the beta HCG is plateauing or rising, the one most important thing that we need to first check out is the patient compliance.
Yes, yes, very,
Right?
very clear. Very, very
Because
true.
many times, because the patient is feeling well and patient may be asymptomatic. There might be no bleeding PV. She's not having any problem whatsoever. And then the patients tend to default on the treatment. So first of all, we should do that. Then secondly, if the patient has been compliant, even with a single agent like methotrexate, perhaps we sometimes need to change the single agent, that is methotrexate, we need to change to actinomycin D. So that also should be tried before we actually jump to Imaco or any other such regime.
Yes.
So what
Okay.
is the take
So
home message from here? Yeah, Bhagaloki,
the
please.
the clue to this one is that it was after just molar follow-up, she has had this invasive mole. Just after mole, that's in the chat box which I could read, that after the molar evacuation this has happened. So I think we can count, because she's a young patient, we can give her first score her, of course, score her and give her the, and usually she will be a low risk disease, so we can start her off with methotrexate and folinic acid, which is the 8-day regimen which is most commonly followed throughout the Asian countries. And in case she doesn't respond, then we can think of actinomycin D, because actinomycin D is a really toxic drug. Though the response rates are very good with actinomycin D, but we need to monitor them very closely because of the so many side effects of actinomycin D, the hematological side effects. So for us, Asian countries and developing countries, methotrexate and folinic acid 8-day regimen is the best.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, Dr.
For this case, we have seen that in this case, there is a large lesion in the uterus and which has invaded the myometrium and extended up to the serosa. So
Yes.
whether it is needed to do hysterectomy, as her age is 45 years, before giving the Imaco.
Yes, I think we have scored the patient. What is the score of this patient?
The score of the patient is 12. What informations we have already in our hand, score is 12.
I think because of the large lesion in the uterus, I think we can offer her hysterectomy, though it may not change the score, but I think she'll need a lesser number of cycles of Imaco because she's 45 years. I think her family is complete. And but then we should not think that this is a very less risky surgery, because these are really very like what I should say, some senior person with the ICU backup is always better, because they bleed so profusely sometimes, and so we should counsel the patient also and take her up for surgery with a little caution.
Thank you, madam.
Yes,
And my last question is that her score, what information? Yes.
Dr. Rupender wants to talk. Rupender, please.
No, nothing, Chana. I just wanted to agree with Bhagya that, we should be very cautious when doing surgery. So what we can also do is that let her take 2 cycles of Imaco, then do the surgery, and then let her complete the rest of the cycles of Imaco. That too can be done. So, but for each and every patient, we have to individualize the treatment. And importantly, we have to counsel the patient, explain to her that she's better off without this uterus, because what Bhagya very rightly said, if we let the uterus remain there, she would probably require 6 to 9 cycles of Imaco, and still she might respond, she might not respond, because the vascularity of the lesion in the middle of it might decrease a lot, and on imaging that lesion might still persist even after you have exhibited a lot of chemotherapy. And so one is never really sure that have we treated the disease or we have not treated the disease.
Okay, thank you.
Many times the cysts continue to persist in the myometrium, though the beta HCG becomes negative.
Absolutely.
Kamal bhai, do you like to summarize this? Or do you...
No, I think it is, very nicely confirmed that this type of patient, we should get maximum information, but we should not do overkill of the investigation where it is not required. but we should not miss the investigation when it is required. Like in this case, ultrasonography is fine, but if we are suspecting something, we can do the MRI of brain rather than putting the money on the chest CT or CT scan of abdomen and MRI. But yes, when we are having a plateau, we can look for into it. And we should always score the patient. We should start from the low end, not to jump into IMACO. And I like the last tips of Rupinder, that few of my experience, I have found this, it was very helpful, that when there is such a big lesion, we can give 2-3 cycle, reduce the tumor, and then the risk of these bleeding things also become more operable, like induction type of chemotherapy in this type of situation. Even we plan for a surgery, and then we can go for the further chemotherapy to reduce the beta HCG, because sometimes, as she mentioned, it could be a very dangerous thing to go for surgery of such very highly vascular tumor. So I think we can, we had so many information from this case, we can move to the next case, because we'd already.
Yes, and I am agreed to Dr. Kamal Bhai, because after we have seen several patients that they have completed their IMACO either 6 cycles, 7 cycles, but 8 cycles, and the beta HCG level is just falling, and that at a rate they are just plateauing. In that cases, we can do that the hysterectomy. But in these cases, we can go for, after getting several doses of chemotherapy, we can go for hysterectomy, just simple hysterectomy, and then the another cycles of the IMACO that will decrease the number of cycles of the chemotherapy. Yes.
We'll move to the next case.
Should I stop sharing, sir?
Yes. Yes, you can. And I want to give you one information that in one's tumor board, where Dr. Rupinder was with us, there was a case that was just as the hemoperitoneum patients, the whole abdomen was in full of the ascitic fluid. Whether there is the hemoperitoneum or ascitic fluid, we don't understand, but because the case was in periphery in the northeast regions, and it is 350 kilometers away from Dhaka city, and no investigation, and patient was so poor that Dr. Rupinder, she advised us just put a syringe and throw the pulse of Douglas and show if it is just the hemoperitoneum, it may be the invasive mode, and the full of the uterus, may be, abdomen may be full of the blood. And the next day they do that, and there was the hemoperitoneum, and they open the abdomen without doing the evacuation, and then after opening the abdomen, they showed that there is abdomen was full of the blood, and did the hysterectomy to the patient, and that was very much helpful for us. Yes. Now I request Dr. Shushmita to present your case. Shushmita, please.
So thanks, Rupinder, giving the tips. It was helpful for a center 300 kilometers away from Dhaka.
Pleasure is mine.
Yes.
All of us are working towards the patient. So then that's so nice.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, madam. Can I audible?
Yes. Yes, you are.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Honorable Chairperson, respected faculties and learned participants, very good evening. I'm Dr. Shushmita Vardhan, resident gynecological oncology of NICRH, now going to present my case in this tumor board. Mrs. X, 60 years lady, was diagnosed as a case of carcinoma cervix stage 2B, squamous cell carcinoma grade 2 on 2003, and treated with EBRT followed by ICRT on due time. She was on regular follow-up and asymptomatic up to 2013. After 16 years of treatment, that is from September 2019, she developed repeated painless hematuria, and every time she was treated conservatively by local doctors. She also noticed a lump in lower abdomen for last 6 months. With these complaints, she was referred to gynecological oncologist. She was a widow for 10 years, and she is normotensive, non-diabetic. Her bowel habit was normal, and there was no significant family history regarding any cancer. On general examination, the patient was mildly anemic, non-ectatic, non-edematous, ECOG score 0, no palpable lymph nodes, and breast and thyroids are normal. On parabdominal examination, a 18 into 16 centimeter smooth, non-tender cystic mass with restricted mobility in hypogastric and umbilical regions are found, and there was no ascites. On pelvic examination, cervix found flushed with vagina. There was no visible growth and other part of the vagina remains healthy. Uterus found about 20 week size with soft consistency and all fornices were free and there was no deposit found in the pouch of Douglas. Both parametrium were free and rectal mucosa was free in the rectovaginal examination. Regarding her investigations, her hemoglobin was 9 gram per dl, serum creatinine 1.1 milligram per dl, and CA 125 50 unit per ml. Her urine routine microscopic examination revealed plenty of RBC, but urine culture showed no organism, and her chest X-ray findings was normal. Her ultrasonogram showed bulky uterus 16.5 into 13 centimeter with huge endometrial collection, possibly due to cervical stenosis. No cervical mass is noted. Parametrium repair appears normal. Bilateral hydrouterine nephrosis found. MRI showed bilateral moderate hydrouterine nephrosis, which compression by large cystic mass in the mid pelvic region. Moderately enhancing soft tissue mass in the cervical region with cervical canal stenosis and large collection within the endometrial cavity, giving cyst-like appearance. There was no ascites or lymphadenopathy. IVU showed right-sided mild hydrouterine nephrosis, possibly due to extrinsic compression or direct involvement by the mass lesion. And cystoscopic findings were there are telangiectasia present and suggestive of radiation-induced cystitis, and there was no growth found in the bladder. Her uterine drainage followed by endometrial biopsy was taken on September 2020. About 2.5 liter of straw color fluid came from uterine cavity. And the cytology of those fluid was suggestive of carcinoma, and histopathology of those biopsy taken from the endometrium showed endometrial adenocarcinoma, clear cell type. The patient underwent laparotomy on October 2020. Uterus was about 20 week size. Both adnexus were normal. There was no ascites, no metastatic nodule in the abdominal cavity. Plan was total abdominal hysterectomy, but cervix could not be removed completely. So subtotal hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy done. The final histopathology report was moderately differentiated endometrioid adenocarcinoma. Tumor is seen to infiltrate up to serous layer, and section of fallopian tube show deposits of cancer. From the second postoperative day, there was hematuria, which was gradually increasing in next postoperative days and was not improved by any medications. Now, the questions. What are the causes of hematuria in this case? And how can we evaluate hematuria in a patient after radiation?
Dr. Supriya, please. Supriya, are you here?
I think, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So going by the cystoscopy report, this is clearly radiation cystitis. And so there is also, I noticed some infection that was present in the urine routine microscopy. So the first way of managing her will be with the course of antibiotics, but most of the times these things don't settle completely with antibiotics. In our clinical practice, we use hyperbaric oxygen treatment for these patients because that helps in revascularization. But I think more than her hematuria, if it is not very persistent, I think her second primary needs to be addressed because she's undergone an incomplete surgery because of adhesions. So both the things. So if I have to prioritize, I would first prioritize her treatment and then take care of the hematuria later on. So for hematuria, for the time being, I would use conservative management by giving her antibiotics, cold saline irrigation, and try to manage the treatment for the relapse. She's had relapse of she's had a second primary endometrial cancer with subtotal surgery.
And do we have the biopsy of the cervix also? Because the fluid from the endometrial cavity showed carcinoma.
Yes.
What
Yes,
was the
biopsy
biopsy of the
report.
cervix?
Yes, adenocarcinoma and clear cell type it was.
From the cervix?
From the endocervix.
From the
And
endocervix.
endometrium. Yeah, endometrium and endocervix, both are clear cell type.
Okay. But the endometrial fluid showed carcinoma. Endometrial biopsy, what was the biopsy report after surgery?
After surgery, it was moderately differentiated adenocarcinoma.
Okay. And the portion of the cervix which was removed also showed the same histology.
Yes, yes, same histology.
Bhagya, is there any reason
have a
why you are
question.
always focusing on the cervical histopathology? Can you please?
No, I just wanted to know whether the primary is in the endometrium or the cervix. So if you could do some ISC also to confirm whether it is endometrium or the cervix. Because endometrial carcinoma is more common after radiation most of the time.
Yes. But her whole vagina and everything was clear. Cornices were clear, both parameters were free, and cervix was healthy looking on local examination. Yes,
but
but in these
what was
cases,
the difficulty in removing the cervix? What was the problem?
It was so fragile that it could not be separated from the bladder wall, and so in fear of the getting the fistula formation, she was the part of the cervix was just left.
Okay.
But there was no other deposit in the abdominal cavity.
Okay. Maybe there was also some additions for the previous radiation and the disease both together.
Not so much addition as because previous radiation was probably in 1998 around. Am I correct, Sushmita? In 1998. Yeah. Yeah.
2003.
See,
2003, yes.
it is clear that what Supriya also said, that it is radiation cystitis, and apart from giving her antibiotics and hemostatic agents like Trenexa, we could also do a cystofulgration. No, the prominent bleeding points, you can fulgrate them cystoscopically, and that would look after her hematuria. And coming to the point of her adeno-CA, mostly post-radiation, if at all we are looking at any kind of carcinoma, it is generally we find sarcomatous changes in the endometrium rather than an adeno-CA, and that also one of the reports seemed to say clear cell, and we have also found deposits on the fallopian tube, right? So this is definitely a disseminated disease, and it needs to be addressed by giving her several cycles of chemotherapy. So that I think should be our line of management.
But again, going back to the same thing, if it is clear cell carcinoma, again it will be chemo resistant, and we have left the cervix behind.
No, that's
is there
okay.
any role of re-radiation?
I don't think so. Supriya, I don't know, you would be the best person to answer this.
This actually is a very tricky situation here, because she has adverse effects from previous treatment already.
Exactly.
And she has partial surgery, and she has fallopian tube deposits. And so it is actually, in this particular case, it is not very straightforward, because we know that with clear cell systemic chemo doesn't work very well for clear cell especially. So in her case, even though, so what Dr. Sekhon has suggested, that doing something like cystoscopic fulguration after settling her acute cystitis, which also has infection. So we will have to consider her again for CTRT if curative approach is envisaged, because if we give chemotherapy alone, it becomes palliative, because tumor is not removed completely. So
That's
if we have to be radical, then we have to accept that she's going to have much more morbidity. And in this case, it is not easy, because she already has morbidity from previous radiation. So what I would consider for her is to actually re-irradiate her using external and brachy. And once that treatment is over, not wait for cystitis to develop again. After 3 to 4 months, prophylactically send her for hyperbaric oxygen once there is complete response to tumor. But all these are very hypothetical discussions, because in real time you may see that she may never respond to the second course of treatment. So one has to go step by step. So this is a complicated recurrence. So I don't know what will be the further course of this patient, and you have to go step by step.
But
Yeah, quite right. I mean, one doesn't
yes,
really know or how she's going to respond to what kind of treatment, and accordingly individualize, and um, we have to.
Yeah, whatever
Then
it is, it's a palliative intent. So I think the quality of life should be the first issue to be addressed.
Why do you
Yeah,
say
I want to
palliative?
point one thing.
yes, Kamal bhai, yes,
Supriya,
Yes.
regarding the radiation cystitis type of situation we see in prostate and cervical cancer, in addition to all the treatment, counseling the patient about the nature of the bleeding is very important. We need to reassure that this is not life-threatening most of the time, but it is annoying and bothering. So I think because sometimes we may not solve the problem because hyperbaric oxygen is not always available, and
yes.
sometimes it is not a foolproof solution for anything. So maybe she may have this episode on and off and no permanent solution. I think one of the most important thing is that we need to explain the patient and reassure, as you mentioned, that this is not, even it is a hematuria, unless there is a clot and blockage, it is not a issue. We should be focusing more on the disease.
Can I ask
Kamal
the
bhai,
surgeons
but
just a
Yes,
minute?
yes,
Kamal bhai,
Supriya, yep.
yes,
I
No, no,
want
but
to
Supriya,
ask one question
yeah.
to the surgeons in
yes,
the forum. So,
yes.
why was exentration not considered? She had adhesions with the bladder, right? And she also has cystitis. So, will there
Yeah.
be a place to just consider exentration for her?
Yes, as she had repeated hematuria and different time, and what Dr. Kamal Bhai, he told that the hematuria is not a matter, but this patient, she received several bags of the blood transfusion. Even after that, the hemoglobin level was either 7 or 8, and as hyperbaric oxygen is not available. In that cystoscopy, they told that there is nothing important, and after completions of after getting her treatment with that, there was why this surgery was done. It is the fact because in MRI showed there is no other deposit in abdominal cavity and everything was normal. Cystoscopy was normal, and there was the uterus was around 16 to 18 week size after drainage of the fluid, and so it was tried to do only the simple hysterectomy.
My question to the surgeons is that is there an option? Because if we try to treat her either with chemotherapy or radiation, it will become with chemotherapy it will become palliative, and with radiation we will end up complicating her again because she is going to develop more radiation cystitis. So is there a case to go in again and consider exentration?
So
Well,
now,
can
yes,
answer that, Supriya. You do have a case in point because we are now moving towards a thimble bladder actually, no? As we try to palliate this bladder, and perhaps at a later date after she's received some chemotherapy, perhaps we might actually consider an anterior exentration, which would also look after the cervical stump which has been left behind.
I think if her general condition is fine and there is no distant metastasis ruled out, I think she should be a good candidate for exentration.
but question is that sometimes the patients, they are not agreed with
Yes.
exenteration.
No, we have to
Yes,
counsel them. They have to accept that's their choice actually. So we
yes,
can't
yes,
force it on them because the post treatment complications are also not very less. So they have to take care of the stoma and all those things. So we have to counsel them, and they should be mentally and physically prepared to take this surgery.
but
Yeah,
not the issue is now that
no,
the
the
issue
discussion was
is still her
bladder.
hemoglobin is slowing down.
The
Yes,
hemoglobin is
Rupendraji.
9.4. What we saw that even in spite of hematuria, her hemoglobin was 9.4. So I think the hematuria was not
No,
too alarming.
no. It was after getting the the blood transfusion.
Oh, okay, okay. So I was thinking that the hematuria is minimal because the hemoglobin was 9.4.
No.
Are very complex cases, and patients should be
Yes.
counseled to go to another center, for example, where cystoscopic fulguration is available, because
Yes.
if we keep on managing them conservatively, it is going to go into this vicious cycle. And second thing is that the decision has to be also taken by patient and the family. It is not straightforward. If you do exenteration or you do re-RT, the course of this patient is very complicated. You can already see that. So here the risk of having severe complications is upward of 50%. So this is
Yeah.
not something that doctors can decide alone for the patient.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You have to counsel and they'll take the decision.
Yeah, because not many patients are actually willing for a IC, that is.
Exenteration. Yeah.
Supriya, there is a question: is radiation cystitis is a contraindication for radiation? So I am just wondering. I mean, maybe the radiation may take care of the radiation cystitis sometimes, because some dose of radiation may make a temporary stoppage of the bleeding.
No, I don't
Hemostatic
agree.
radiation.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that because so actually it depends where you are re-radiating. So for example, a patient has a nodal relapse where the bladder is not going to get high dose, because typically from intracavitary it is the posterior wall of the bladder which gets high dose. And suppose a patient comes back with an external iliac nodal recurrence, so there will not be as much of a risk, because even if you give dose to bladder, it will be to a totally different region. So but in this case it will again be to the posterior bladder wall because cervix is left behind. So I will be very cautious, because radiation cystitis after 15-16 years, in my experience, patients get very complicated, because when you treat them they develop cystitis, then they go through this very difficult cycle of bleeding, then they have clots that get stuck in the urethra. You have to do a repeat cystoscopy, instrumentation. Finally, down the course, within 1.5 year, they go into these repeat cycles of sepsis. Then again there is instrumentation, and one fine day their bladder ruptures and they end up with a serious terminal event. So radiation cystitis at 16-17 years can get very complicated. So I will be more cautious. Proctitis is easy, it's not life threatening. If patient has fistula, you do a diversion stoma and you can get away with it. But for bladder perforation, first of all, the sequelae are not very easy, and living with a urinary stoma is much more difficult.
Yes, now the stump is not her problem. The problem is the hematuria. The repeatedly her hemoglobin level is just, it is 7, 6, and 8 like this milligram, and her creatinine level is rising. So we are worried about her this type of hematuria, not with the cervical stump.
So Shahana, the problem is we are discussing
Yes.
about a situation which is very dangerous, but not a
Yes.
very common, but it is very life-threatening. But the good news is that Banu Madam is sharing in our
Yes.
barn, Sheikh Hasina Barn Institute, probably, they have a hyperbaric oxygen, which they are using. So what Supriya was telling, that I know they are using it quite routinely. We can take a help of that, and we can take support from Supriya and their colleagues about the protocol, how they are using, how much hours and
Yes.
time they are putting.
Yes.
And that could be helpful for us to take care of this type of
Yes.
unfortunate patient, because it is not very common, but when it happens, it kills the patient and the doctor both.
We use
Yes, yes.
2.5 to 3 atmospheric pressure oxygen, and that is given to patients for 90 minutes per day for 20 to 25 sittings. But there has to be somebody who's a specialist in hyperbaric oxygen, because there are some complications related to HBOT, because it's high pressure atmospheric oxygen. So we do a baseline evaluation of patients by doing a chest x-ray, ruling out interstitial lung disease, doing ECG, and also doing basic hemoglobin check. So if everything is fine, then patient goes ahead with hyperbaric oxygen.
So as Supriya promised that there will be a lecture on radiation,
Yes.
I think she will be covering few tips like, as she was telling, that is quite interesting that when you are radiating, you need to take care which part was getting a dose before, and how can you say making a full bladder and empty bladder make a big difference, mapping the previous dose area, and also taking care of that tips situation. I think she will be covering, and that will be a quite interesting lecture for not only radiation oncologists, also for the gynae oncologists, because we have many things to do now. Techniques are allowing us to do many things. We can hear maybe within a next month. She was suggesting that in February she can talk on that.
No, March.
Okay, March. Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. And I also request to cover also the radiation induced the proctitis, because this type of cases we are dealing, and I request you to cover also the cystitis and the proctitis in your lecture.
Yes, that will I'll take as a separate lecture on
Yes,
proctitis and cystitis. Yes.
Okay.
So
Now
Shahana, can we finish
Yes.
it? I think.
Yes, yes.
So are you
Yes,
going to
thank
tell
you.
that the first case was treated by whom? 20 years back, the first
Yeah.
case? The first cervical
Yes,
case. Who
first
was the
case
treating
she
first case
physician.
we
Yes,
discussed?
I have. Yes, I have added her. Dr. Sajjad, he was with us,
No,
and
no,
I
no.
called
The
him and he was
first
with us.
patient, first treating physician was
Yes.
Professor Heiser.
Yes, first treating. Yeah, I want to announce that the first treating physician of our first case is Professor Dr. M.A. Heiser, who is the professor of, who is the president of this oncology club and chairpersons of the 2 day session. Yes, I would like to thank our president, and I would like to thanks all the faculties, and also the Dr. Rupender. Without faculty, she's with us, and also Dr. Unju, she's with us, and I request, always grateful to all of you. Now I request our Professor Heiser to say something and conclude the session.
Question, poll, question.
About the
Repeat poll.
poster.
Oh, sorry.
Post test.
Yes, before that, the poll question. Yes, Samir.
30 seconds for each question, Samir.
30 seconds, yes. Everybody has requested to answer the questions, because whether it is wrong or right, this is not the matter, and nobody will see the answer. So please answer the question and submit, and at the end there will be lottery and there will be one winner. The poll in progress. Please answer. This is the first question.
30 seconds for each question.
Now the second question. Okay. Yes.
Third question.
Yeah.
Fourth question. Last question of today.
Voting is complete.
So, Madam, we have our winner.
Yes, please. Samir.
Farhana Haq. Come forward, Farhana Haq.
Farhana
Let's
Haq.
see.
Farhana Haq, please. Yes. Farhana Haq, please.
Are you here?
Please unmute. Yes, please start your video. Farhana Haq.
Assalamu
Is
alaikum.
probably the resident.
Farhana Haq is. Put your
Assalamu
video on.
alaikum. Miss
Put your video on.
You please introduce yourself. Farhana Haq, please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Farhana Haq, resident of Gynecological Oncology in National Institute of Cancer Research and Hospital.
What your video is not working? Put your video on. Let us see you.
Farhana, open video.
I have requested ma'am to share her video.
Farhana.
Yes, Papa.
Nila. On your video.
You cannot give prize.
Yes, sir. Next time we will announce this. Without showing video, we will not give the prize, sir.
Exactly. We must see.
Thank you, sir. I'm surprised to get the.
No surprise. All of you deserve this.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So goodbye, everybody. It was a nice evening we spent.